My name is Karrie Varberg. I'm 59 years old, and this is my story. I was born in Idaho, in Lewiston, Idaho, in 1966. My dad was in the Army. He had just got out. He was actually a sniper. No one in my family has been able to find any of his history when he was in the service. We're kind of all under the impression that he may have had a pretty serious job when he was in there because there's just almost no record of where he was or what he did. That was kind of interesting, something I grew up with my whole life. And so they had me, and about 8 months later, they had decided they wanted to go out. Both my parents were pretty heavy drinkers, and they got into a car accident late at night, about probably 1 o'clock in the morning, and he was killed instantly when I was about 8 months old. So I never did actually know my real biological father. I was very close with his mother. My mother made sure that I was close with the rest of the family. And I'm very grateful for that. My grandmother wound up being one of those grandmothers you hear about a lot with those of us in recovery. It's pretty common to have that grandma that just she really saved my ass, actually, is what happened. But anyway, then my mom remarried when I was about 2.5, and she married another alcoholic. He was a long haul trucker, so he was gone a lot. He would be gone a week or 2 weeks at a time and then come home and be home 4 or 5 days, maybe a week. But he was possibly the kindest man that I think I've ever known. He was an alcoholic, absolutely. But I was a little kid. I didn't know any different. My mother, especially after having gone through the death of my biological father, she was under a lot of pressure, and she had a very hard time dealing with really anything that was stressful or difficult. And she was had a very explosive temper. And I can just remember being very, very little, like even before kindergarten, and people constantly talking to me and telling me that I was the cutest little tin soldier that they'd ever met. I heard that so many times, and I never really understood it until I got older. But it was my mother, we just had the dynamic in our house that, everything really did have to be perfect. And, we had the furnishings and the beautiful house and the beautiful cars, and my mother is beautiful. And I just grew up in this world where, and I knew very, very early that really all that matters is what it looks like. And I have spent almost my whole life working through that and putting that to rest. That's been one of the most insidious things, that perfection message. You've got to be perfect. It was a perfect setup, is what it was. It was a perfect setup. So there was a lot of rodeo in my life. My sister and I both, and everybody, my cousins, everybody. We rode a lot of barrels, and we had horses, and we drove around to different gaming events and rodeos all over the Pacific Northwest, and those were really, really great memories. My aunt and uncle both, they were team ropers, and had a great time with that. But in the rodeo community, there is a lot of Budweiser, and every single person in my life, I can remember being a child and actually thinking, every single grown-up drinks. Okay, I guess when I grow up, that's what I'll do. I'll drink. Everyone did. Everyone. And I mean, like, when I was a kid, everybody had an open Budweiser in the truck. It just wasn't even bat an eye at it. It was just normal life, is what I thought. So, it really wasn't a surprise when I got older and, tried it. Um, my parents, as I mentioned, were alcoholics. My mom, I mean, I know that she can have those problems, but for the most part, she just tends to have a lot of compulsivity. She's, there's a lot of issues around food, trying to be perfect. I'm sure that it was hard for her because I was that fat kid when I was little. I was just this white-haired, just Stay Puft Marshmallow kid. I mean, and that was the same for me until I was also a late bloomer. It was real sad. It was really sad. But in between my sophomore and junior year, I definitely transformed, and my life was a little bit different. But my poor mother was just saddled with this little fat kid, and she just really. I heard about it all the time. I don't even remember wearing something that wasn't black or navy blue until I was old enough, pardon me, to maybe like babysit and buy my own clothes, because in her mind, you just always put fat people in black clothes, so that's what I wore. And, that I thought that didn't really bother me much, but that had a big effect on me, growing up. I can remember having a conscious thought very, very young that I know I'm supposed to be perfect, but this is how I am. And I just knew that she was just going to be disappointed with me, and that she was disappointed with me. And, she really was. She really was disappointed in me. And it was a very sad childhood, very, very sad. I did whatever I could do to get out of the house. All I wanted to do was be gone. So I loved school. I loved my teachers and all the activities that came along with it. I did get really good grades. I was in gifted and talented classes. I just thank God for school. Thank God for school, because it really, that's really where I got all my self-worth from, really, was from school. But then, I got a little bit older, and high school started happening, and I mentioned that we were drinkers, and I do remember the very first time I actually deliberately, I mean, we had taken sips off our family members' beers, probably before we could even talk, frankly. I mean, there's pictures of all of us, being babies, sitting on somebody's lap with a cigarette hanging out of the baby mouth and a Budweiser in our hand. Everybody thought it was so hilarious, that kind of a scene. But my parents were having struggles. That my dad, being a long haul trucker, he would get in a lot of trouble out there on the road. And so I think they were married probably 7 years or so. I was about 11, and they announced that they were going to get divorced. And I can remember just being so relieved. It was kind of sad. My dad came up to tell me that they were getting a divorce, and he was all sad about it. And I just jumped right up. And I mean, I was just so relieved. I was so glad that the fighting was going to be over with. And I think it kind of broke his heart a little bit. But it didn't take long for it to really set in, though, because he wasn't really my dad. He was just my stepdad. And by then they had my little sister, and she's 4 years younger than me. And so they were going through this divorce, and the whole entire fight was over Nanda, my little sister. And by the time I was 11, I was already like mortally terrified of my mother. I did whatever I could to stay out of her way and to be a very good girl so that I didn't get in trouble. And I just had this idea in my mind that everything would be okay because I would just make sure that I didn't do anything that would cause you any problems. And that has been a theme of my life, literally until 5 minutes ago, which actually is a lie because it's still with me. It's something that I work with all the time and work on all the time. But that is absolutely where that came from. And I just can never forget the day when I thought that I was going with everybody, and my mom just stopped me and said, "You're not going anywhere. You have to live with me." I can barely even say the words. It was so traumatic. She just said, "You cannot go with your dad. You won't go with your dad. You are stuck with me. I'm all you have." And it just struck fear in me, and I went out into the camper. We had a little camper park that, out near the pasture, and I just sat down and cracked open a beer and commenced drinking the whole thing, and it took about 5 or 10 minutes, but And if you talk to really about anybody that's an alcoholic or an addict, they'll tell you this. I felt like I was home. I just felt like, oh my God, this is what's been wrong this whole time. Wow, this is what I'm going to do. And I did. I started to sneak drinking. I mean, I don't know if it's smart enough or not, or if it's just that I was born alcoholic, but I definitely knew not to drink a lot all at once because the grown-ups would figure it out. And so I learned how to chug like a half a beer and leave the rest of it out in the barn and then go back out 20 minutes later and chug the rest of it. And man, I did that, probably from fourth grade up until probably seventh or eighth grade. And that was really when my drinking career started. I don't remember ever getting like completely wasted or anything like that. I just was a maintenance drinker. I started to smoke cigarettes when I was 6 years old. And we had these neighbor kids, the Zadros. They'll go down in history forever. Those boys were so naughty. And the two oldest ones are twins, and they were 15 probably about the time. And they just pointed out to me I'm not really smoking because I'm not inhaling. And so they taught me how to inhale. And I can remember being very, very little girl and taking a drag and learning how to inhale once I stopped coughing. And I could feel my nerves completely calm down. I don't know if it's nicotine does have that effect on us physiologically, but I suppose that when you're 6 years old, you could really notice it. But it did calm my nerves. And I did become addicted to nicotine at that extremely young age. I got caught one time when I was 7. My dad could not believe it. I'll never forget him just leaning on the bathroom counter, just not having a clue what to do, or leaning on the bathroom wall and saying, I've heard people get in trouble for this when they're 17, but not 7. I was 7 at the time. And I managed to continue that addiction right up until I finally quit smoking cigarettes, probably 5 or 6 years ago. But I tried to quit smoking a couple times. The first time I tried to quit smoking, I actually had to go to a psychiatrist because I started experiencing like psychosis. And this is really where we put the connection together about learning to smoke when I was 6. I really had learned how to fix myself, and that my nicotine addiction was going to be wrapped up in a lot of psychology, and that it might be a little bit difficult for me to quit, where, just to keep that in mind. But I got so freaked out at how I felt when that one time that happened. That was when I was probably 26 or 27, that I just never did try to quit again. It's like the same as some of my friends who have had issues with drugs, and, they'll say the same thing. They just kept doing drugs so that they wouldn't DT. Anyway, so in high school, I liked to party. I definitely did party. I still maintain my grades. I have a maintenance of a very, now I can look back on it, and it's actually pretty frightening because it's pretty actually frightening how I maintained that and lied about it and really did keep it from everybody. And except for one time in the 7th grade, I decided it would be a good idea to get drunk and go to school, and I passed out and got in trouble and got expelled, and it was a big, huge issue, that's for sure. But other than that, I really never got in trouble. I never got caught. I never got in trouble. There was always booze. There was always beer at my house. You could literally walk away with a case of beer and nobody would notice. It would just, especially if you were sly about it. And I just always had a car. I just always was the one that drove. I was always the one that picked everybody up. We were always out in the woods. We always had a bonfire. We always had a cake. And, it was drugs, sex, rock and roll. I graduated in 1984. The music was awesome. Back in Black album dropped the year before that. It was like the atmosphere, And I still did not get in trouble. it's almost scary, really, how I got away with everything as well as I did. Because I mean, I was just wasted, man, just wasted. And then all the other stuff that goes along with it. I discovered the 1,000 lots of crosstops in the back of High Times magazine. My dad was a trucker, so I knew all about the actual real crosstops, which he called whites, and I had discovered those probably about 15, 16 years old. And so I had a little side hustle at school selling these crosstops and black beauties, and there was a little period in time where that was a thing in the 80s, early 90s. Did that, and that definitely helped me to be able to drink more. I didn't usually do any of this stuff at school. I mean, I just really didn't. I can remember one time I was really hungover, and then one other time, like in high school, that I don't know if it was like early release day or what. We thought it'd be a good idea to get drunk, but I never got caught. I just never did. I don't know if it was I was a good student and everybody just didn't think that I would be the type or what. I just don't know, because I mean, I always had the booze, I always had the vehicle, I always had the 6 kids loaded up into my car. I'd have no idea, no clue why I didn't get in more trouble than I did, but I did. And that did not help me, because I really got this. I don't remember consciously thinking it, but I really did just assume that I was not going to get pulled over and that I was not going to get in trouble. And I don't know why, but I'm just charmed. Jump in the car, we'll be safe. I mean, I would brag about it, just be cocky. And um, yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't get in more trouble. So I graduated in 1984. By then I had met, I had a boyfriend that I'd had for about a year, and informed my mom that we were going to get married when I was 18. I actually received my engagement ring the night of homecoming. She, of course, flipped her lid. He also was a pretty heavy drinker, a lager from Idaho. Always had a lot of money and a lot of cocaine. This is when cocaine entered into my life. And my senior year, I mean, I just had a constant cocaine supply. I didn't tell anybody about it because then I'd have to share. So that's just, I guess that makes me really an addict. But so yeah, pretty much by my senior year in high school, I had experienced acid and cocaine and weed for sure. I have never really liked marijuana. Weed was not a gateway drug for me. Budweiser absolutely was a gateway drug for the hillbillies. That's where that's how that was happening for me. But yeah, by the time I was 17, I had pretty much tried just about everything that was available back then. And I could just handle it. I thought that I was unique back then. I thought, oh, there's just something about me. I can just handle whatever you give me. So I just knew that whatever you had, I was going to have twice that amount for sure, because I have a super high tolerance to everything. And I just thought that I coined all those phrases and that I was so unique, unlike everybody else. And then X amount of years later, when I got back in the rooms, I discovered that this is literally everyone's story. This is what everybody says, That's like one of the first ways I knew I was in the right place was all the shares from people, and they were just telling my story before I even had a chance to really talk to anybody in any of the 12-step rooms. That they were all telling my story before I could even open my mouth. So anyway, but I shouldn't jump ahead. My drinking career was, I mean, I can't lie about it. I had a great time. I had a fabulous time, like between the age of 15 until probably, as far as drinking goes, I really didn't have a negative issue with it until my husband got a DUI. I was about 28 at the time when he got the DUI, but that was really the first time that any alcohol had really, affected me much. But it was the first time that I learned about, any of the stuff that's going on in the 12-step rooms, or, a lot of the mantras, or just the ways that they think about things. But other than that was really the only time I even ever experienced anything 12-step at all. So in the background, my dad and my parents had been divorced for a long time. My dad had continued to drive truck, but he was working for a farmer because he had finally drank himself to the point where he couldn't do long haul trucking anymore. And he, by the time he was 49 years old, he was basically incapacitated as far as his alcohol went. And I remember one morning, I was pregnant with my third child, and my dad had called me, and usually he would call and talk about the weather, like if it was raining or something and he couldn't work. And I knew he was just sitting at the kitchen table, drinking Canadian Club and Bubble Up, and just wanted to, talk to me for hours because he was drinking. And this morning I just had a really bad feeling about it. It was a little too early for that. And I picked up the phone, and it was his girlfriend, and she said that his boss had said that he had left work and that he hadn't called home yet. Had he called me? And I said, no, he hadn't called me yet. And I just knew something really bad had happened. And he did, in fact, have a heart attack and die that day. And he was only 49. He was a diabetic. He refused to go to the doctor. He refused to take care of himself. And he really did just sit at the kitchen table and just drink whiskey as long as he could until somebody made him get up. That's what he'd do. He'd just sit there and drink. And he drank himself to death. That was a really hard day. But it didn't stop any of us from drinking. That's for sure. So I did go through a pretty solid period of no drugs or alcohol. I mean, it was always in my mind. I know that I'm a real addict and I'm a real alcoholic because, I went 10 years one time with absolutely no substance, no alcohol. I had all of my children sober. And up until my daughter, my oldest child was, she was probably 16 years old. My kids had never seen me even drink a beer. They had never seen me drink a beer. We were very involved with our church, and I've always been a real spiritual person thanks to that grandma that I talked about in the beginning. She really did lead me to God and taught me. I'm so grateful. I just have escaped all of that, like a lot of warped ideas that people have about their creator. And it's all because of grandma. I'm going to try really hard not to cry. It's kind of hard though. Tears of joy though. I think about her and I'm just so grateful. She was really my lifeline, So my dad died and we just keep on drinking, or we had not drank at all. And everybody else in the family was still drinking, but my husband and I, we did not drink. We were actually very, we were trying to do something different. And that was all well and good until grandma died. And actually both my maternal and my paternal grandmother died within 2 weeks of themselves. And I took care of both of them. And then I also had 2 aunts that were my grandma's daughters. So they were the sisters of my father who was killed in the car accident. And I was very close to them too. Very, very, very close. And one of those aunts also passed. And this all happened. They were like my mentors, that it was like my backbone just got pulled out from my body. And like I just did not have any legs to stand on anymore. And there was a lot of work to do, with cleaning out the house and taking care of the funeral and everything. But so one day I was driving down from her house and we were trying to get everything all together, and it just popped into my mind, I think I'm just going to pull over and I'm going to get a 6-pack. Yep. And I drove about another 5-10 miles and I thought, yeah, I am. I'm going to get maybe I'll get 2 6-packs. It didn't take very long and already, And I thought that'll probably last me clear through the weekend. I haven't drank for so long. Shoot, I'll probably be drunk off 1 beer. And do you know, I stopped and I got that 6-pack and I did not stop drinking. It did take a little while, but not very long. Within 2 years, I was unrecognizable. There was a lot of shit that happened in that 2 years, but my marriage was on the out. I lost all my mentors. We had been talking about divorcing for probably 10 years, before we actually did. And I drank that 6-pack, man. And it was just like it sealed the deal. And I just could not handle it. I just could not do life without all these missing people. And my husband, he always worked at, he's a brick mason. So he just works in pulp mills all over the United States and Canada. And so all those years that I was at home with the kids, I really was all by myself, and my marriage suffered. Everything fell apart. Like in about a 6 month period of time, people died. My marriage fell apart. I started drinking, and like I said, within 2 years, I I was unrecognizable. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. Nobody could understand what was happening. I was this closet drinker, and I went out with some friends, and I made some really, really bad choices that ultimately wound up ending my marriage, wound up getting a divorce. I moved in with my last remaining aunt, who was a low bottom drunk for sure. And then we continued to drink together. And I just continued to decline. Um, I had really, really good jobs. I started to lose them. My children were definitely not speaking with me. They did not understand what was happening with me. I just went from this friggin', like every gal USA housewife person who, I mean, I just did all the stereotypical stuff. I was like the president of the band boosters. My kids were all overachieving, good students. I was involved in all of that stuff. And then I just kind of, within that short amount of time, just turned into not leaving the house, not doing any of those things that I just mentioned. And then eventually I just moved out and got my own apartment, and I did get a divorce. And that is really where everything went sideways. I lost 3 jobs within probably 8 months of each other. And I met a man. He was a very bad man. He was a very, very, very bad man. But I wasn't thinking clearly, and I did not make one good choice probably for a good 5 years. I did not make one single decision that was decent or right or well thought out or and I still to this day suffer to a certain degree because of the choices that I made. And this was, shoot, man, 2005, 2006 and 7 down in there. It's been a hard road, but anyway. So I was with this man, and he was incredibly abusive, and there's not a lot of reason to spend a lot of time on it. But it was really one of those terribly abusive situations. And after it was all said and done, I wound up with over 100 broken bones and fractures. And he actually, I don't know if it's still in play, but back in the day, the state of Idaho had an attempted murder charge out on him for me. And it was, I had never ever lived or been at the hand of anything like that before in my life. And I think that, every time I think of it, it just sounds so ridiculous, but it's the only way I can think of to explain. I really was that naive that somebody could really be that mean to somebody. I mean, up until that point, I really had only seen or witnessed these things on TV. Although I had had this history with my mother, I just had never had that kind of experience with a man before. And I really did think that, okay, he's going to stop now. I mean, because you just wouldn't do this to somebody, and he just never did. And so I eventually left him. And in the course of leaving him, it was hard to leave him because he would just then find me, and then we'd get drunk, and then we'd be together for another 2 weeks, and then we'd fight again, and then I'd leave him. And this went on. This just went on and on. We got kicked out of apartments. I lost more jobs. It was hell. I eventually, and up until now, I still had not gotten any trouble. I except for the lost jobs. I mean, I hadn't been pulled over or anything until this one night. I decided it would be a good idea after drinking all day long to drive to the payphone, because we didn't have a phone or anything, to call his daughter and try to make some Christmas plans. And I pulled out and crossed the double line, and then thought it would be really cute to gun it and try to get back over in the other lane right in front of a cop. And I got pulled over, and I got a DUI. I blew a .24 that time, so I was definitely good and drunk. And since I had absolutely no priors whatsoever, they let me out, and I never returned. And until the following month, I wrecked my Jeep. I totaled my Jeep. I actually, again, just completely hammered, crossed the freeway, and a 74 Camaro drove right into the side of my Jeep Cherokee. And I just will never forget the sight of that top of that Camaro. And that's an old style Camaro, man. And it was just like an accordion. The woman got out and walked away. We all walked away from that. And I do believe the hand of God was on me there, because I mean, you just do not get hit, boom, 55 miles an hour on the freeway and just walk away from that, you know. So now I had 2 felony DUIs under my belt, and I thought that I need to get the hell out of here. And I sat down with myself, and I had a discussion with myself for about 2 minutes about, okay, what do we really need to do here, Karrie? And I honestly could not say to myself that I could quit drinking. I knew I wasn't done. I just wasn't done. I knew by then that I couldn't quit. That really did have an effect on me, because I could recognize within myself. I mean, you know, this Camaro hits me. I get blasted over on the other side of the freeway and hit an embankment. And I literally reached around behind me. And the guy that was with me was actually in my seat with me. And I was pissed off because I couldn't reach behind me to get a beer out from behind me. So I just got out of the Jeep so I could get a beer in the back seat, and then I just stood out there and cracked that beer and smoked a cigarette, because I knew the cops were going to be coming any second. And the guy that was with me, I'll never get it out of my mind. He just sat there with his mouth hanging wide open, just like, and he said, "You are insane. You are crazy," and he meant it. And, you know, I just was so cocky and just blowing them off and like, you know, F you, and just, they're coming anyway. What the hell? You know, I mean, I didn't care. I knew I was in trouble, you know, and, but that really is not me. That's just not me at all. But that's what I did. And the cop showed up, and I blew a .32, and the cop did it 3 times, because he just kept going, "This can't be right. This can't be right." And the whole time I'm just bad mouthing him and just making fun of him and still just smoking and drinking. And he finally grabbed a can out of my hand and threw it on the side of the freeway. And he said, "I need to tell you, your blood is more than 1/3 alcohol right now. You should be dead laying on the side of this freeway, not breathing. And the fact that you aren't tells me that you are a serious alcoholic and you really need help, okay?" And I heard every word in the middle of all. It was like a moment of clarity. Everything just went clear, and I zoned in on that guy. And my eyes welled up with tears, and I realized that he was right. He was right. And now I look back on it, you know, I've been here a few minutes, and I think about blowing a .32. I mean, and that was really all anybody could talk about, even in the courtroom. And I still ran from it. So they let me out because I had no priors, and I got on a Greyhound bus and went with the awful person that was beating me up, and we went to Oregon, because I asked a few questions and found out what would be a state I could go to where they would not extradite me back to Idaho. Oh, Oregon. Idaho won't bring you back from Oregon. So I was like, okay, I'm an Oregonian now, I guess. And so we headed to Seaside. I thought it would be a bright idea. I had vacationed there for years with my kids, you know. So I thought, why not live in Seaside? That would be so much fun, and it's not. But anyway, I spent a few years with that gentleman. It was extremely hellacious. I still have just bumps and bruises and just scars everywhere. And I mean, yeah, I definitely, I got my left ear is cauliflowered shut, and you know, there's just a lot of reminders of that. And it did get, it really did just get so bad. But and he actually finally did get taken away by the police, and he was in jail for 6 months. And there was a guy that he worked with who's a really kind person. And there was no weirdness, no funny business or anything, but I was just in Seaside, I had no family, the other guy's name was Damon. He was in jail, and I just was really stuck, and I befriended this other guy, and we decided we need to get out of Seaside, just in general. Let's just get out of here. And he had some friends that had a pole building up in this little town called White Salmon, Washington, and this guy that I had met is also a carpenter and build cabins for a living, and they wanted that pole building turned into a cabin. Want to drive up there and build a cabin with me that we could live up there for free and build this cabin. It's on 40 acres of timbered land. We'll just, get the timber off the land and build this cabin. And I mean, I had nothing going on. And I said, sure, because I have no boundaries. And I mean, at that point, I didn't. And that, in a kind of a roundabout way, wound up kind of being my saving grace. So we did. We got this. Somebody picked us up and we drove all the way to White Salmon from Seaside, and that's exactly what it was. It was a pole building with an RV under it. There was no running water. There was electricity, but it was plumbed for like a pole trailer, or not plumbed, but wired for a pole trailer, But that's where we lived, and we did, in fact, build a cabin, and I drank the whole effing time. I barely did anything at all because I was just laid out drunk all the time, so depressed. My family had already gotten to the point where they were not talking to me anymore. Nobody had an idea what was happening. In that time that I was in Seaside and when I actually left town, I completely walked away from everybody, and I stayed completely hammered, completely like slobber coming out of my mouth, hammered for years. Yes, for years. I should mention, just because it should get mentioned, that while I was with that very bad man and before I went to White Salmon, we were in Seattle. He was a musician, and so he would pick up gigs, and we were in Seattle and fell on some hard times, and he was just going to go up to Alaska and fish. And I thought that we would make arrangements for what to do with me, but that was not the case at all. In fact, he just said, no, I'm going to go to the airport and get on the plane, and you're going to have to just figure out how to live in Seattle until I get back in 4 months. And that's what I did. It was totally horrifying. I am absolutely a small town girl from Idaho, and I have not lived in the inner city, and I had not had any experience with any of that. I was incredibly naive. I mean, I definitely thought that I was a tough farm girl, but I had no idea what I was talking about. It was incredibly dangerous. And I lived on the street in Seattle for about 6 months. I stayed in shelters and, navigated that whole scene right down at Pike's Place and 3rd and Vine, and hung out right on the Blade. And, I learned more it was actually only about 4 months that I was really on the street, and all total I was there for 8 months altogether, but I learned more in that 4 months than I have in possibly my whole entire life all put together. I definitely don't regret it, but I'm definitely grateful that I got out of it alive. But there I definitely learned how to smoke crack. I mean, that's what you got to do when you're homeless, right? I guess that's not very funny, but there would be so much drugs in that area in Seattle at the first of the month that you really could find rock cocaine on the sidewalk. It happened all the time. I would find rock cocaine and then turn around and sell it to people for extra money, because it would just be laying there. These people would just get so high. They'd just be throwing it all around, and it was definitely a different experience. But I did get out of there. Okay, I got out of there, thank God, and I don't ever have any intention on going back to that. But, okay, so here I am in White Salmon, and my one remaining aunt, who is an alcoholic, now living in Florida. She was an incredibly successful businesswoman, and I was her favorite person on the planet, and so she passed, and she left me a very sizable inheritance. She left me a $40,000 inheritance, and it was in stocks. And during that period of time, something happened with the stock market and it literally increased $21,000 like in 3 weeks. So I cashed that thing out for $61,000 and finally had some money to get out of white salmon. Actually, we were closer to Trout Lake. We were like up in there, up in the Trout Lake area. And I came to the Dalles. And the Dalles, Oregon, looks and feels and acts, and I mean the streets and the way there's a one-way downtown and just everything, the topography of this area with the river and everything is almost a carbon copy with my hometown, Lewiston, Idaho. So I felt at home here immediately. I knew I was supposed to be in the Dalles. I just had this feeling that I was supposed to be here. And so I got an apartment and kept drinking. And I remember at one point I finally decided maybe I should tone down my drinking when the whole entire kitchen wall was nothing but Franzio wine boxes. I mean, literally from the floor all the way to the ceiling, all the way from one end of the kitchen to the other was nothing but wine boxes. And, I think about those things now and how they didn't seem to bother me that much back then, but I think about it now and it's just like, who in the hell was that? Who is that real? It just doesn't even, it's like a different life. It's like a different life. Moved to the Dalles, found a really good apartment. My friend we stuck together the whole time, and I did not know about him this whole entire time. The people that we attract as we're out there aren't always the most stable individuals, and he, unbeknownst to me, was a schizophrenic, and he commenced to have a complete schizophrenic breakdown right in front of my eyes, and long story short, wound up getting hauled off. And then I was really stuck in the Dalles with literally nothing and no one, no job. He took the cars and he took all the money out of the account. Not all of it, but enough to where I had to, I just had to figure it out like right now. And that might have been the most desperate time because I had tried to quit drinking. My kids had come to visit me after I got the apartment in the Dalles. They took a chance to come and visit me, like, ooh, maybe mom has got her, act together a little bit. And I started drinking by 7:15 in the morning. And by 10 o'clock, my oldest child was literally in my face, throwing stuff at me and threatening that if I did not stop drinking, that I would never see them again and that I would never meet my grandchildren and that she would get a restraining order against me if I ever came to town even. And another moment of clarity. So first it was with the cop and then it was with my oldest child. And I have not had a drop of alcohol since that day. And that was actually... it was at some day in July in 2011. But as soon as they left, and they did leave, my youngest child freaked out. It was a whole big scene. Brant was running all over the Dalles. My oldest child couldn't find him. It was just one of those heinous, terrible things. I created quite a few of those types of situations, and my kids were having already a very hard time because all of that time that I was in Seaside and living in Seattle, I had no contact with them, and they really thought that I died. And I, that's been, I wouldn't really say hard isn't really the right word, but a really a lasting article to deal with because being a mother, because of the way I was raised, I really put a lot of intention in it, and I really deliberately did a lot of things that were different from the way that I was raised. I had no desire to raise children the way that I was raised. And, I just went to classes and I talked to pastors and I just did whatever I could do, read books and to try to be the best parent I could possibly be. And then my alcoholism and just, and who I was all along, I wasn't aware. I just wound up being completely inebriated and totally walking away from them. And, when I'm out there, the days turn into weeks, turn into months, turn into years. Time we just had lapsed. I was incredibly, incredibly shamed to realize really the amount of time that it was that they had no contact with me. And it was the worst irony for my life ever, because I really wasn't a good mother. I mean, I really wasn't. I mean, you could say that I did okay for all those years, but I've swallowed a lot of chunks of truth about myself since I've been sober. And one of those is that, there's no sense fooling myself. I made mistakes. I made mistakes with my kids. And even though I've been sober, which I guess I didn't actually say when my sobriety date is, I've been sober about 13 and a half years. And this is something that I still work on with my kids. We definitely still work on this. And I do not have the relationship with my children that I always thought that I would. I always thought that at my age that there would be grandchildren, and that I would see my kids a lot more than I do. But there's a tension and an awkwardness that is still there. That I don't have any intention on ignoring it, because it would be totally disrespectful to them. So I just really allow them to just do what it is that they need to do. We try to have as open and honest conversation with each other as we can. But my oldest, that same one that actually is responsible for me quitting drinking, has completely cut me off. It's been a little over a year now, and she is the mother of my only grandchildren. So I have not seen my grandchildren either for over a year. And that's been, boy, I tell you, if I ever had a reason to relapse, that would be a good one. Because I pretty much lived my whole life to be a grandma. I really wanted to be just like that grandma that pulled me out. And I really thought that would be such a good goal. And, something to aspire to be, something that would be a good moral thing for me, a compass kind of thing. I felt without a compass a lot in my life. I felt not really being sure of, really my own self, or, not understanding boundaries, not understanding, when people would be mean to me, not really understanding that, or even allowing it, because I didn't even understand that they were being mean. There's been a lot of confusion around that kind of thing, but so it hasn't always been perfect, and I have made a lot of mistakes. I definitely have, but it's a lot better than it used to be. So anyway, I quit drinking after that time that Elena came and yelled in my face, and I had gone probably a year or so with absolutely no alcohol, but I did have the worst detox and the worst DTs. I don't know. I mean, I've been raised and been around drinkers my whole life. I don't know how it got past me that you can die from alcohol detox, but I did not actually know that. And so when I decided that I just really wasn't going to drink ever again, I had detox for about 2 days, and I hallucinated for 2 days. And it was just about as heinous and nasty as you can imagine. Both ends completely releasing. I spent a whole day in the bathtub, covered in my own stuff, terrified that I would somehow pass out or, lose composure and kill myself on my own vomit. It was really gripping, terrifying, very terrifying experience. Very much. I can remember checking trying to get my eyes to not do this as I watched the clock to count my pulse rate. And I finally did figure out that my heart was pounding like 200 beats a minute. It was just boom, 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 boom. And that went on for days. So grateful that I came out of that. I think I could have stroked out. Pretty positive. I can remember losing consciousness and then just willing myself back and go, no, and sitting right up and grabbing a hold of the headboard on my bed and making myself sit up so that I wouldn't go to sleep. And God, I'm just so grateful that I didn't go to sleep. Oh, so grateful. So I did get past that, and I did smoke a lot of weed to get over that detox. I've never been a weed smoker in my life, but I smoked a lot of weed to get over the detox because I shook this bad. I couldn't hold a fork to eat, and I shook that bad for a couple of weeks. It was pretty bad. I think I was pickled. I'm pretty sure. But I didn't go to any programs, and I didn't go to any doctors. I didn't do anything like that. I just thought, okay, I quit drinking. All right, I did it. And then we had the psychotic episode, and my friend took off and left me in the Dalles, and I went through the next 2 days after he was gone, and I realized that I was totally alone. I had no idea what to do. All the money was gone, and I did not have a job, and the rent was due in about 5 days. Panic set in, and I experienced the worst Jones of my life. I have never Jonesed as bad as I did during this period of time. It was almost as if Satan himself was just right behind me going, just do it, just do it, just do it, just do it. I actually was thinking about what would happen if I mixed up Comet cleanser. I was thinking about whatever I could do. I was so desperate to get this awful feeling of restless, irritable discontent out of me that I came to the realization that I am still an alcoholic. I thought that if I quit drinking, and I didn't drink, and it had been a year that I hadn't had any alcohol, I thought, that's it. You're done. You're cured, right? That's it. No. I thought about robbing my neighbors so that I could drink. And I thought, wow, you really have a problem. But in my mind, I thought, okay, well, that's it. That's all she wrote. I mean, you proved it to yourself. You cannot quit. You might as well just, finish it. And I, in fact, did sit down, and I made a plan, and I wrote out letters to all three of my kids and to my mom. And the only thing that was really holding me up was, thank God it was holding me up, was that my guns were still back in Idaho. So I called up my mom, and I made a plan to come over for a visit, and the whole thing was just a ruse, just so that I could get those guns back and bring them back to the Dalles. And I did that. I did bring those guns back to the Dalles, and they were in my bedroom for about 2 days, and I was reading over the letters, and I cannot really explain it. I've explained this a few times since I've been sober, but if there's anybody out there that knows what it feels like when you disassociate, like where you just literally trance out, and it's like you're not even in your own body anymore. And that's how I felt when I was coming up with that plan and looking to execute that plan. I was like a machine, And at the same time, I was getting all my affairs in order, like cleaning my apartment and making sure that the landlord was not going to be left with a bunch of property for him to deal with, and, calling all the businesses and canceling all my bills. And just, I was so methodical that it's kind of bone chilling to me when I think about it. I personally believe that it was the hand of Providence, also known as God himself, that really pulled me out of that, because I really was just like in a trance, like in a zombie state. And I can remember I had this plan that I was going to execute the plan like at 8:00 at night. I don't know why I picked that time. And I was just making sure everything was in the right place, because I had it all worked out how it was going to be found. But this was a plan, and it really was going to happen, because I am an alcoholic, and I had learned at that point that my life is unmanageable. And I had also learned at that point I have no control over it, that there's no end to this. I'm never going to get out of it. I'm going to be miserable. I am a broken, damaged, defective monster. I mean, I just thought that this was going to be a really good plan, because everyone will not have to deal with me anymore, And I was literally in the middle of thinking that, walking down the hall of that apartment that I was cleaning to leave, and I just dropped everything. It was like the clouds parted in the middle of the hallway, and I just said, what am I doing? Oh my God. It was like I just came into my right mind out of the blue, and I just stood there in that hallway and put my hands on the side of the hall, and just, I bet you I stood in that hallway for 20 minutes just trying to get my mind back and think, well, what should I do? Should I go to the hospital? Should I, this is as simple as it was. I thought, I got to find a place where there's going to be a population of people that are drunks or have problems with alcohol, but that don't drink and are happy about it. It's got to be church. That could be the only place I could think of. And it just kind of gently wafted into my mind, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was like, oh yeah, AA. Yes, that's where I need to check out. And I took 2 more steps. On the back of the couch was a newspaper that was laying there, and it was a classified section. And I picked it up. The very first classified was for the women's AA meeting on Tuesday night at Gateway at 6:30 in the Dalles. And I looked at the clock. It was about 5 after 6. I had no idea where Gateway was, but I could tell by the address that it was on this side of town. So I threw all my stuff in a backpack and I just blasted out the door. And it was summertime and people were mowing their lawns. People were outside, and I was just asking people while I was walking that I just literally had to get to Gateway Church because that's where the alcoholics were. And I just had a 1-track mind, and that's what I did. And I blasted into that meeting, coming off of that climate that was back at my house and everything with everything that had happened. And people still talk about it. Like on my birthday and stuff, they'll talk about it and they'll say, Karrie was completely insane. Oh my God. Like that's what they always say. We didn't know what to say to her. We didn't know how to talk to her. She just was literally, because I was so completely desperate and had no answers for so long that I just had the relief to be in a group with all of those people that had drug and alcohol problems, but all of them were clean and sober. I just could not believe it. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. I felt like I had entered heaven. You know, I was like, this is the answer. And I just knew that I knew. Oh yeah. Yeah. So as I was walking into that meeting, I just very quickly said to the sky, can you just confirm for me that this is where I need to be? And I sat down, and this makes me cry every time. The very first thing that I heard after praying that was, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And I just thought, oh my God, what did they just say? And of course, I've heard it a million times now because it's read at every single Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that there is. 12-step meeting, sorry. And I just knew I had my answer. Rarely have we seen a person fail. You don't get that kind of a guarantee from any self-help book or any psychiatrist that you could see, or any program, or any, trip that you're going to make on some retreat with your church. No one's going to give you that kind of a genuine guarantee. But AA gave me a guarantee. It did. And so before I left that meeting, I made up my mind that I don't even care what they say. Whatever they say, I need to do. I'm going to do that. I got nothing to lose. I got no job, no man, I'm literally got nothing else in the world. And so they told me what they tell everybody. You've got to get a sponsor. You've got to get a big book. Got to get it 12 by 12. So that's what I did. And I started working the steps. And that was July 30th, 2012. And I've never looked back. I've just never looked back. There's been some wibble wobbles here and there, but I just was like a house on fire. They could see me coming at the meetings. They I got a lot of crap because I kind of have a strong personality, and I'm a talker. I like to talk. I love to talk. Love talking to people. I love people. I just love people. And I love being around people. I love to hear whatever they have to say. I always feel like whoever you are, whatever age you are, whoever you are, I probably have something to learn from you. And so far in my life, that has never not been the case. It's just always what happens. Somebody says something that, oh, that's cool. Like I just love them. I just love people. So, I like to talk to him. So anyway, I got a lot of crap over that because I was just completely insane. I was just completely out of my tree. It makes me laugh when I think about it now because I had what they call the gift of desperation, and I was desperate. And when she said to me, "Are you willing to go to any lengths?" I said, "Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes." And my line is that I say to people is, I'm pretty sure I could have got sober off a bubblegum wrapper. I mean, if you guys would have told me that this is what will make you sober, I would have said okay, and I would have done it, and it would have kept me sober. I just had that kind of faith, man, and I just knew that I had heard from God, and that was the right thing to do for me. And I had a pretty mixed up, troubled childhood. I had a lot of physical and verbal abuse, like before I could talk. So I had a lot of specific issues around that made me kind of neurologically unsound, with really not a lot of words to go along with it, because I just never, I couldn't talk when a lot of damage was done to me. So I've had a lot of automatic triggers over my life. That's been very, very challenging, and probably a huge reason why I drank, because I could control myself, but inside I would be just literally on fire, or just feeling like my skin was, being peeled off. And since I've been in recovery, many, many, many things have happened. I remarried, also a person in recovery. That was an awesome experience. I've done a lot of service work in the rooms, and that, when I say service work, I just mean, after I was here for a few years, I felt like I wanted to give back, and so I try to just make myself of service. And now I sponsor a lot of gals. I love to sponsor women. That's really how I keep it going now these days, because I've had a couple sponsors, but when you're working with another woman, then it just keeps it fresh. It just keeps it fresh as you go through it over again. And all of those things that were so shameful to me, that I felt like I could never tell anybody before, they kept me good and loaded, actually. Now those are the things that I actually pull out of my pocket and hand to women when, they feel like they're so full of shame, and like they've just been so bad that they couldn't possibly, talk to anybody about it. Now I can just say, well, here's what happened to me, and next thing you know, it just keeps it flowing, and that's really why I love the 12-step groups, because I literally am enmeshed into a group of people, and there's a lot of them that always tell the truth for the most part. And anytime there's been anything that's happened in my life, they're always the first people right there to help me. I had a house fire. You would have never barely known it. All of my friends in recovery completely took care of us. They found us a house. They did my entire wedding reception. They took care of everything that we had to do, except for it was just all of my friends in the 12-step meeting rooms. I have made friends and relationships with people that I didn't think were possible. I didn't know that this type of a thing actually exists. I've had some family members that I was really close to, and I've had some really good friends over the years, but the bonds and just the relationships that I have now in my life, I've never experienced anything like this.